All right, boys and girls, we're going to go ahead and have a little review lesson on one of my favorite things to teach. It's the first lesson of Unit 2, our series of demand, supply, and pricing. But we're going to get into the fundamentals of demand. Here's the things I want you to be able to do today. I want you to be able to describe what demand is and what qualifications have to be met for it, summarize what the law of demand is, interpret demand schedules, and differentiate between market and individual demand schedules and curves. So as we go through this video, these are the 4 things that you should be trying to accomplish. And when we finish, you should be making sure that you can do all 4 of these things. So let's get started. First of all, let's talk about what demand is. Well, it's the measurement of how much a consumer is willing to buy of a good or service at each price. So when you go to buy something, it's basically taken into account of basically demand. So bags of chips, here's how many that I will be willing to buy at $1 versus $1.50 versus $2 versus $2.50 and so on. So you have so much that you're going to be able to want to buy. There's 2 things that has to be in place for demand to exist. The product has to be desirable, and you have to be able to afford it, because if both don't exist, then there's no demand for it. And let's go ahead and I'll give you an examples or some examples of what exactly I'm talking about here. So I've got 2 things on here. I've got a Crying Kim Kardashian t-shirt, which when I looked it up, it cost about $24. I can afford that. However, I don't want it. So for me, you could sell that thing for $1 and my demand for it would still be 0. So again, we have to be able to afford it, and we have to find it desirable. Then on the right here, we have a mansion. Now for me, that's very desirable, but as a teacher, probably just it's not in my future unless I hit the lottery or hot hand in a dice game at Motor City Casino or something like that. I don't even do either one, so I'm kind of stuck where I'm at. So I like it. It's very desirable, but I can't afford it, so I don't factor into the demand for the mansion. Now, that doesn't mean that demand doesn't exist for the mansion. It's just that demand doesn't exist for me. And the same thing with the t-shirt. There are some people who will actually buy that shirt, so demand for them actually exists. So if we were going to have an individual demand curve for both of these, I would not be able to put demand on there because I either don't want it or I can't afford it. But if we do a market, which we'll talk about later, you'll see that people in general will want to buy that t-shirt on the left. I don't really know why. And there are people who make a whole lot more money than I do that can afford the mansion, so they'll actually have a demand for it. Let's try and evaluate another set here. Oops, it just went one too far. Here we go. So, Baskin-Robbins mint chocolate chip ice cream. I find that very desirable. That is my favorite ice cream. I actually have some in the house. And video games on the right. So I actually have a copy of Gears of War 4. So I can afford both of those. Obviously, I just told you I have both in my home. And I find them desirable. Obviously, again, because I find them both in my home. So, when those came out, when the game came out, it was desirable for me. And now that I have it now, I wouldn't exactly have it, any demand for it. But on the left, I absolutely have some demand for that. Let's get into the law of demand too. The law of demand basically says when price goes up, the quantity demanded goes down. And when price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. So they're an inverse relationship, which just simply means that they're opposite. So let's think about it. If something became more expensive, would you buy more of it or would you buy less of it? Chances are you're going to buy less of it, so it fits with what we have going on the left. And then what we have on the right, think of it things like on sale. My dress shirts are not exactly that cheap, and I can't really justify purchasing them at full price. So the demand for dress shirts for me at full price, it's not very high. And then when a sale happens, and when a sale price goes down, my demand goes up. I'll actually go out and buy some on occasion. Let's try and visualize the differences between individual and market. Here we have me actually on the left. I took that picture when I was graduating from college. So individual, here's how much I'm willing to buy of a good or service at each price. And then on the right, we have the market. So we have a group of people. So basically the demand from everyone. Now, who's in your market, that really depends. And I don't want to make it too confusing at this point because we're going to be talking about market size in a future video. And we've already talked about it in a lesson in Classroom anyways. So the market is basically everyone. So let's go back to our ice cream example. Here's how many cartons of ice cream that Mr. Norton is willing to buy at each price. And, so it's going to be a quantity that's suited more for an individual because it's just one person. And then the market, this is how many that everyone would be willing to buy at each price. This is how much ice cream everyone is willing to buy at each price. So the quantities will be much higher. So we have some examples here. Think of it this way. Only I'm not going to use ice cream. I'm going to say more of DVDs. At $30, I'm not going to buy a DVD that's just too much for me. At $25, I might buy one, and at $20, 2, 15, 3. And then when we get down to 5, that's kind of like when you walk by Walmart and you've got that bin full of old DVDs and you get that nostalgic feeling and you end up walking away with a bunch of them and you probably don't even watch them, you just have them. You're like, oh, I have to have this because I used to. So that's basically an example. And we can see the law of demand going on here because as the price goes down, I'm willing to buy more of it. And as the price goes up, I'm willing to buy less of it. So this is a schedule. A schedule is just basically a table. We've talked about the difference between schedules and graphs before, so this is just reinforcing that particular idea. I'm going to take the same information in the schedule and put it into a curve. This is the same exact information. Remember, at $30, I was willing to buy no DVDs. And at $5, I was willing to buy 7 of them. And right here you can see that I've labeled this a demand curve. And keep in mind, demand curves will always go from the upper left to the lower right because it follows the law of demand. Because the higher the price, the less I'm willing to purchase. Let's go ahead and take a look at a market demand schedule. So it seems like everybody in the market believed that they just weren't willing to buy any DVDs at 30. But you can notice that we have a big difference when we hit 25. I wasn't willing to buy, I think it was just one for me. But when we look at the market, they were able to sell 75 of them, or people were willing to buy 75 of them. And then as you can see, as we keep going, instead of 7, we have 300 down here when we get to 5. Let's take a look at putting this in the form of a market demand graph. Here we can see the exact same information. At $30, no one was willing to buy any of these DVDs. And at $25, we start to get more and more that people will want to buy. And once again, this follows the law of demand because at the higher price, people were willing to buy less of it. And in this case, obviously, they were willing to buy 0 of it. And then as we start to go down, everyone was willing to go ahead at $5 and purchase 300 of that particular product. So this pretty much rounds out our lesson. So I'm curious, would you be able to describe what demand is and what qualifications have to be met for it? Could you summarize what the law of demand is? If I gave you a demand schedule, could you go ahead and tell me what's going on with it? Like, going back, how many would I be willing to buy at $5 versus how many would I be willing to buy at $7? And then the same thing for market. And do you actually know the difference between a market individual demand schedule or curve? So if you can do all those things, you'll be just fine moving forward. So pretty soon I'll be posting another one when we talk about the fundamentals of supply. We'll see you then.